Well, bring it. I am. Board members. We're ready. It is 6:00 p.m. on Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. I would like to welcome you to the Los Angeles Schools Public Board meeting. And I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome those who are participating in the Board of Education meeting in person and those watching the meeting via live streaming on YouTube. We would ask that anyone addressing the board to use the microphone at the podium and to identify themselves for the record. As a reminder, the link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. In the event there is a disruption in the streaming, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. We're on item 1 of the agenda. And I will ask tonight that our acting superintendent, Mrs. Chavez, lead the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the United States.
Thank you. Please be seated. We're item A, number 2, the ascertaining the quorum. Mrs. Wolf, would you please take roll call and announce it for the minutes? If any of the board members are absent, please announce that. Present.
Present. Here. Here.
Present.
Thank you. We're on item B, announcement of the meeting. Mrs. Chavez, would you please announce the meeting?
This meeting has been announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Angeles Schools Board of Education.
Thank you very much. We are on item C, executive approval of the prioritized agenda. Mrs. Chavez, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
There is one amendment to the agenda, item G. The tabled at 8/27/24 date should read 8/20/24. It's on the for the policy discussion, so item G for policy E900.
Policy B0900, correct?
Correct.
Thank you for those corrections. I would stand for a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Vickers.
The discussion on item G.
It was a correction on the date that it was tabled and on the reference to the policy.
Okay.
It was written as E900 when it should be B0900.
Well, given all that, Madam Chair, I move that we approve the agenda with the exception of item G and remove it for now.
You want to remove item G? Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Talley, Mr. Motion.
Just motion.
Mr. Motion.
Yeah.
Mr. Talley.
Give me a fun night.
Mr. Vickers has moved and Mr. Talley has seconded to approve the agenda with the exception of item G, to remove item G, which is discussion and possible action regarding possible revision to BOE policy B0900 board organization meeting, which was tabled on 8/20/2024. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, I just think that it would be more appropriate to discuss that in a workshop initially before it's brought to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Is there any other discussion? I will call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. We are on item D, the acting superintendent of schools report. Mrs. Chavez will give a brief intro for each topic of her report and will introduce the presenters.
Please allow me to introduce Century High School's representative for this month, Juliana Ortega. She is a proud daughter of Rosella Romero and Joshua Ortega. Juliana's educational journey with the Los Lunas School District began at Ann Parish Elementary, followed by Los Lunas Middle School, and then Los Lunas High School for the first semester of ninth grade. She joined Century High School in January of her freshman year. Since her arrival at CHS, she has successfully completed our Atlas program, recovered all her credits, and is on track to graduate on time with the class of 2025 this spring. Juliana has been inspired by CHS's entrepreneurship classes and sewing club, which has sparked her ambition to own a business where she creates and sells faith-based home decor and clothing. As an active participant in our school community, Juliana is a founding member of the CHS Student Council, a leader in the entrepreneurship program. I was instrumental in planning our first annual car show and craft fair. This past summer, she served as a peer mentor in ESY and is currently working for our district as a student mentor at Los Lunas Elementary, where she supports an elementary student during language arts. Juliana is a passionate advocate for Century High School, showcasing all the great things happening at our school and contributing to the vibrant atmosphere at CHS. A true Centurion, Juliana stands out as a leader in the senior class. Her infectious energy has fostered an environment of enjoyment, connection, and belonging through the initiation of student-run activities. Thank you, Juliana. The podium is yours.
Good evening, Board President Oswalski, members of the board, and Acting Superintendent Chavez. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about Century High School. We have many fun activities planned, as well as after-school programs. On September 4th, we had our open house, which included classroom tours, door prizes, s'mores, and a senior celebration bonfire. At the open house, students and families were able to learn and sign up for after-school electives and tutoring. The after-school electives consist of It's Only Fabric and Thread, Innovations of the Century, Capture the Moment, Pumping Iron Like a Centurion, Mythology, Community Mural Art, and Centurion Music. The after-school credit recovery consists of Imagine Learning and Algebra 1 Support Lab. This year, we have some new classes, including the second level for Project Lead the Way in Entrepreneurship, a new service learning classes, and a class working on virtual job training in welding and Caterpillar heavy equipment. We also have started an official student council. Whenever a student finishes an Ingenuity class, we hang up a paper crane made by the student council. We are having a competition. The most students that finish an Ingenuity course will receive a pizza party. Another exciting thing happening at Century is having Apple iPads. For the entrepreneurship class, last year, we only had 3 iPads the entire class had to share. So students were not able to work individually. But this year, we have a class set so we can all work on individual projects. Our service learning class is working to open a food pantry and thrift store for our students. This will help students with clothing, hygiene, and food needs. They are working with the community to get donations for the store and recently met with Los Lunas students for ideas. Other events coming up are Senior Sunrise on September 27th and on our second annual craft fair on December 7th. The craft fair is open for the community members to buy and sell products. Our entrepreneurship class is planning to have our own booth to sell products. Each student is given the opportunity to use their creativity to make something and sell. As you can tell, there is a lot of exciting things happening at Century High School, and we are off to an amazing start. Thank you.
Stay right there. That was very nicely done. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask my colleagues on the board if they have any questions or comments for you. Mr. Vickers, would you like to lead?
Sure, I appreciate your interest in entrepreneurship. That's really great. And I think that's a good group to follow. Thank you for your presentation and your poise in addressing a crowd like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you, congratulate Jax for getting back on course and getting all your grades. You're going to be graduating this year, but I think also very important is that you're mentoring the younger kids, and that's really important that they see you as a role model and they guide them up to their way. So I thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Simoia.
Absolutely. You did a phenomenal job presenting, as a matter of fact. Could I have the date of the craft fair?
The craft fair is gonna be on September 2nd,
September 2nd?
December 2nd.
December 2nd. Okay, fantastic. 7th? 7th? Thank you. We will be there. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, who is the point of contact for both your food pantry and your clothing?
My teacher, Miss Carney.
Fantastic. You did an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Talley.
Just like to echo the comments of my colleagues. I've stood behind that podium before and it's kind of nerve wracking, so you did an excellent job. What are you making for the craft fair?
I'm thinking of making a cup with a sublimation machine.
Awesome, awesome. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. First of all, nicely done. It's a little terrifying being up there, but you did great. So we'll have to have you or another one of your colleagues, of course, back. I'm very excited to see that your senior sunrise is in a warmer month this year. So I hope that you enjoy that. I think last year's was in February or something. Is that correct? So very nicely done. Nice with the senior class of 2025. I also appreciated very much that you have regained your credits and that you will be graduating with the class of 2025. Do you have a college in mind? Because I know you talked about your long-term goals, but do you have?
I
Something
do
you
not
do?
have a college in mind. I just know that I don't want to go too far from my grandparents and my parents.
You want to stay a little bit closer?
Yeah, I want to stay a little bit closer.
So are you anticipating college?
Yes.
Do you know that the board has a scholarship I'd like to welcome you to apply for? Did Mrs. Wolf talk to you about that a
She
little bit?
talked to me a little bit about it, yeah.
Well, now we expect to see you
Okay.
in those application stacks, okay? And I would like to thank you again also for the service learning with the donations. As a matter of fact, I have a whole lot of fluff in my car because we recently accepted a lot of donations for prom dresses. So maybe I can speak with you a little bit or your sponsor so that you guys too can have some of the fluff that's in my car that I do not need.
Miss Dutcher would be the perfect one to talk to.
That is awesome. She wants the fluff, not you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you very much.
So just
So,
college not too far away from here, that's really excellent, I'd recommend is New Mexico State.
New Mexico State.
Let's don't take him seriously. Okay, thanks. Girl power, I guess.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for presenting.
And I am a fan of New Mexico State, so go Aggies.
No.
Next on our report is Sandy Tracek, who will be providing information on our budget and finance.
Madam President, members of the board, acting superintendent, Ms. Travis. So I compiled all of the funds that we currently have, that we have budget authority with the PED, so we're not able to spend any money in any funds. We can receive an award, but then we have to let them know we want to enter it into our OBMS and ask if we can start using those funds by getting approval from the state. So when we are doing the budget initially, and we're going through all the other the funds, right off the bat, many of the funds become part of a consolidated upload that I put into the budget, and then the PED, the analyst over there go through each fund and approve it. And these are all the funds that have been approved. At this point, some have even been adjusted, and when they are adjusted, those are the ones that come in as bars. You might see bar increases, bar decreases, initial bars. Those are anything that's different from where we started July 1st. So at this point, these are all the funds we have. So I have the fund number, the description of the fund. The next is what the amount we have the budget authority for. And the next column I have spent or encumbered. That is spent actual checks that have gone out, wires that have gone out, and anything that we have encumbered. So it would be encumbered if we have issued a purchase order. It would be encumbered if we have a contract on someone, and so their whole year's worth of payroll is in there. And the next column, I have the balance remaining, so that's gonna take my budget less whatever has been spent or encumbered, which is most, in some cases, most likely to happen. There are sometimes we open purchase orders, they might be something that might put in as an emergency. So that may never happen, but the PO might be open for that. So whether that number is really gonna happen or not for spent, it's possible that not all of them will be, some of them are just open purchase orders that may never get used. So the balance remaining, if you look at the first one, which is of course our operational is our largest fund, and you look at that percentage remaining, so that's the amount of percentage of the budget that we have remaining. And so I just kind of like to mention that because at 27%, we're in the beginning of our fiscal year, we're just going about the first quarter here. And that looks like a low number. But please keep in mind that the majority of the operational budget goes to salaries and benefits, approximately about 85% of that. And so most of the expenses are encumbered because most of the employees are already on contract, and that amount in the encumbrance deals with a lot of our annual employees. The rest of it that are their salaries that have not received the check yet, but they have a contract, so unless they leave, it will. I have a few other, I like to mention on the transportation, it's in the balance remaining is in that red, it's almost $500,000 there in the negative. We always do have to supplement the transportation fund. So, however, transportation is one of those departments that will open many purchase orders just in case. If they need a tire, they're not gonna stop and have to go through the process of getting a purchase order ready before they can get a tire. So many things, they have a lot of purchase orders open for parts that they may need to go to. So not necessarily everything that's encumbered is gonna happen in that fund. However, a lot more expenses will end up happening. However, we're prepared, this happens every year, so we know to reserve money in operation in that area, in transportation area, to cover those negative movements. Another one I might want to point out is we have had, in case this is, we have a fund called in the 27413, which is the bus infrastructure. That 50,000 is actually from last year. We are hoping to get another award this year. That one is just actually a propane tank. And so we're hoping to get more money that might be able to be the concrete that they'll place that on and a canopy over it. And so it's a larger project. So it's been on hold until we see the full project, and hopefully we'll get a budget authority for the rest of the cost, hopefully another 50,000. Excuse me. Some of the other funds, we do have some of our federal funds go. You can see that some of them are tight. Some of the percentages are low. Some of them are not low, and that's because they may not have a lot of salaries in them. So it really depends on the type of fund it is and whether it includes time card type of pay versus contracted pay. So that kind of just gives you an idea of all, I do not have it total at the bottom, but we're looking at about $238 million in total.
In our budget
budget.
authority amount,
Pardon me?
in the budget authority amount.
Correct. And then usually I also usually put up, another slide that kind of gives you an idea of our graph of our revenue coming in and how much is budgeted versus how much is in. That right now, it's such an infant stage of the budget has like a full year's amount of revenue and, you know, we are just starting to get those funds. So I didn't bother to show, I think, when it starts looking a little more realistic, I will be able to show that to you, but at this point, I don't anticipate any problems with any of the budgeted revenue. Also, I'd like to point out in that budget authority, once the audit's done, any estimates that I've done for cash will be readjusted to agree to what the audit has, so those numbers will change. Hopefully for operational, the unit value will go up and that'll be a bar change. So anyway, that's the only report I have for the budget. Do you have any questions on any of the?
Mr. Vickers, any questions?
Yes, Ms. Tracy, 15157, can you explain that?
That is our grants, our grads fund. And so that is a fund that will depend on the amount of CYFD, or I'm sorry, I don't know the new term for that, but the funds that come in for the students. So if we have grad students that have the children in our grads class, if it is a CYFD eligible, then we will receive revenue for it. If it's a student that does not meet those requirements, then we won't. So that goes, you never know what types of funds you're gonna get for that. But always it ends up going in, and we always expend a lot more than we receive. And I do know that we are currently waiting on, there's a lot of paperwork that has to be entered in that to get those revenue funds, so we will receive those, but that revenue hasn't been entered yet. The reports need to be filed.
So the encumbered amount,
Is 2 employees that are on contract, and so their salaries are in there. So that's their salaries for the whole year, and then any time cards that might happen are not encumbered. So there could be more expenses, but there also will be more revenue, because we do know that there are two babies that we will receive revenue at this point. So,
thank you.
Mr. Bennett, any questions?
I don't have questions.
Mrs. Simoia?
No questions then.
Mr. Tally?
Follow up to Mr. Vickers' question. I was actually gonna ask this similar. Because it is negative, and also the transportation is negative, which you said that generally happens. Will that eventually, if we don't get other funding, will that eventually come out of operational? Is that?
yes, so I don't know if you remember last year, even towards the end of the year, those were in the negative. And so we always do leave those in the negative, so we truly know how much that costs us. So when I am budgeting, I will know that I need to put so much for transportation, and I know that operational always picks up that cost. It is a very worthy program, and so unfortunately, most of the time, the revenue is way less than the expense that we have in there, but it's a great program.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions. Fund 24189, Student Support and Academic Enrichment Program, Title IV. We're at 1% there.
Yes.
Awfully closed. Are we expecting new funds in for FY25?
I don't know if we'll be receiving them. Nothing is planned for that, but I believe that is where we have the salaries, and so the salaries are just paying for that. I'm sure if that's a parent liaison, if I remember. So
is this one of those funds that we shifted costs from this last budget into Title IV in order to hit budget numbers? Did we shift into Title IV? So we have not a lot of money left for program? Is that how I'm reading for Title IV for this fund?
Oh, that, you know,
Yes, that is correct.
the
That is
music.
That is correct.
That's right, the music.
Okay. And then Fund 24330 ARP ESSER 3 funds, 3% left for 47,000. Do we have a plan for that?
So that is the COVID that will end September 30th. So we do have just, we have quite a few things, and then there's also the indirect costs that will be charged at the end of that period. So we definitely have plans for that money. It is almost gone.
Be gone.
There are some things that are reserved for it already.
And with the Fund 24106 and 24109, Idea B and preschool Idea B, I noticed that those funds were also already more encumbrance. The percentage of encumbrance is a little higher than last year's. Is that also where we moved salaries in order to accomplish the budget?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Because those are really where we have some program monies available. So if we need to meet specific needs, we would usually be able to pull from that, but because of budget, we cannot. Is that correct? Is that my understanding?
That is correct. We also do have Medicaid funds, which is 25,153 that we can use to provide resources and supports for our students with disabilities.
Did we have to move salaries over onto 25153?
We did.
Thank you. That's the end of my questions. Thank you very much.
Ms. Racick, do you have the audit report?
Madam President, members of the board. For the audit report, audit is trucking along. We have our monthly meetings with September 30th coming around. That's also usually a date on a lot of things that are due for the audit. So there were a lot of things that are added on our plate right now that we are working on for the audit. So we are knee deep in stuff for the list of what they need on the audit. But we are on time, online, as where we normally are at this point. That's about all I can really say on the audit at this point. But we are meeting and we are providing information to the auditors. Do you have any specific questions on the audit that aren't confidential that I could possibly answer?
Something we could do.
And then it's, yeah. Until it's released, not much I can say.
And we're meeting. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Mrs. Racick.
The next on my report is a construction update from Mrs. McMinn.
The members of the board, acting superintendent, Mrs. Chavez. Thank you for allowing us to present some of the things happening across the district. So in starting with our construction in progress, we continue to see work done at Los Angeles High School, the Stadium Phase 1 improvements project that's happening at the front entrance. The project did see a few delays due to existing utility lines that had to be addressed and some changes in the design, moving things, shifting around some lines and working with PNM on that. We continue to see progress on our Sundance roof coating. Sundance is receiving a coating on all of their roofs. They have completed the cafeteria kitchen area as well as two smaller adjacent roofs. They will start working on the admin area as well as the pre-K roofs. Next, another thing that we have seen started this week across the district is our fire alarm system maintenance. This summer, we conducted fire alarm system inspections across all the district, including central office and the TRC, as well as all our school sites. With that, each fire alarm was gone through an inspection check on every device in the school with an assessment on that. Now we are working through those assessments to get those items updated or corrected to have a fully functional systems. Next, we'll see Bosque Farms pre-K canopy has started this week as well. Some upcoming projects that are in our line of sight. We have been working with our security department to identify areas that we can improve on our facilities, and one of those is security fencing. In the past couple of years, we've addressed a lot of perimeter fencing that we don't necessarily see at front of schools, but at back of schools, where we're installing 6-foot chain link fencing. So some of the areas we have possible security breaches is Valencia Elementary. The property east of the school is district property, and it currently just has T-post and wire fencing where we have seen it cut. So we're putting 6-foot fencing there to help protect our students. We are also adding some wrought iron metal fencing just south of the gym here along Luna Avenue at Las Lunas Middle School, just to mitigate anyone from just wandering back behind the school. So those are projects that we are working with the security department on, utilizing the security fundings that we received. Next, we'll go into some projects that we have been knee deep in. This was recently completed over the weekend. Valencia Elementary cafeteria flooring was completed with the new updated LVT tile. Another project that was completed is Am Parish Elementary pre-K canopy was completed the end of last week. And another item that we sometimes don't always address or talk about are the needs of our band students. So one of the things that our band does is they practice on our parking lots. And so we have updated striping, and one is a new location for Valencia High School that's more adjacent to their classrooms. And the other was restriping done at Las Lunas High School to accommodate them for their practice times. So it may look like we installed a football field over a parking lot, but it is. Peralta Elementary, we continue to see leaps and bounds progress on this project. So you can see a lot of the brickwork south of the building of the pre-K has went up, and we're starting to see block work continue. The next picture going clockwise is the second story of our building. That's prior to concrete being poured and the deck being put in so that those classrooms are coming together. Just below that is a completed drywall picture of a pre-K elementary classroom. So you can see how extensive the size to adequacy. When we talk about adequacy a lot, we don't understand quite what 1,000 square feet sometimes looks like, but these classrooms are built to that standard. Windows have went in within the pre-K wing as well. And then following the last picture there is a look, well, prior to, sorry, is a look inside the cafeteria where the stairwell is going in. So that large open space is part of the cafeteria where the students will be dining. And then lastly, we wanted to give you a different view or perspective of our project on the last slide. We always see it from 47. This is the backside of the elementary school. And sometimes we don't understand the magnitude from the front of the road. But what you're seeing closest to you is the gymnasium, and then the cafeteria pre-K wing going along that way. And then the area that has not been decked with roofing yet will be the 2-story classrooms. So with that, I stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vickers.
Ms. McMahon, is this the total footprint that we're looking at here in this? There's
Correct.
not gonna be any other buildings, but that's it. Basically
Correct.
A team
Yes.
thing.
After the other buildings come down in demolition, that's where parking lots, playgrounds, play fields will be installed.
Great, thank you.
No, great, for the band kids up there, VHS, be happy not to have to walk across campus to get started up. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Mrs. Simoia.
Thank you for the report, Tiffany, and now I understand what those lines are. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Talley.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of little questions. With the security fencing, on Valencia Elementary on the east side of the property. Are we doing the entire east perimeter in the 6-foot chain link or just some portions?
Along the main road, so along the road, yeah,
Okay.
that's there. We'll be putting chain link fencing. We're also adding 2 double gate access points. So that way, if we do have emergency evacuations, our buses can be able to pull in. If we can't use our existing site, it gives us another opportunity for an evacuation route.
Okay, and then on the cafeteria flooring, did we have to account for any kind of cure time on that flooring?
No, they finished over the weekend and we're able to use it the next day.
I had a parent raise that question, so thank you for answering that one. And on Peralta, I had a request or a comment, I guess, just generally received that is there a point in time when the community could be invited in to kind of look at a stage of the construction?
That is something that we actually brought up at our last construction meeting with Bradbury Stamps. The items that they addressed was actually inviting you all to come and see the site first. And they asked, you know, if that was something that you would like to see the site, we can schedule a meeting or a time, whether it's independently or together, as well as talking about our public. Right now, we still have a lot of things in pathways, but I think that is definitely something that Bradbury would be more than happy to accommodate for us.
Okay, thank you. That is the end of my questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate the update.
Thank you, Mrs. McMahon, and thank you, Ms. Tracyk. So to conclude my report tonight, we have settled into the fall semester nicely. We continue to review our enrollment often, every day, as a matter of fact. 40-day count is coming quickly. It is on Wednesday, October 9th. That is a state count for Los Angeles schools that will help determine funding for next school year, as well as provide us an outlook on where we currently stand with the number of students enrolled in our district. This Friday, we will have our Los Angeles High School Community Appreciation Night. It will be at the Los Angeles High School football game. There's free admission and free hot dogs and chips for all fans that will be attending. Valencia High School will have their Community Appreciation Night on Friday, October 18th. We also have homecoming coming quickly for both of our high schools this year. It will be celebrated the same week. It's for our comprehensive high schools. So Valencia High School and Los Angeles High School will have the homecoming game on Friday, October 4th. And we'll conclude the week with a dance on Saturday, October 5th. I would like to thank all of our staff. They're working incredibly hard each and every day to educate our students and keep everyone safe on campus. We've had a pretty hectic last 2 weeks, so thank you all for everything that you've done to keep everybody safe and ensure that our students are learning what they need to be learning in the classrooms. I've been visiting many school sites along with many staff members here at central office, and we're also attending many after-school activities. We're very excited to see our students compete in their sports with class, and I've also had the opportunity to attend many of the activities that are happening at school sites. We will continue to address concerns as they arise. Please let us know if there are any concerns directly so that we can address them as they come. And that concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to remind I'm sorry, Mr. Vickers?
Can I ask this one?
Absolutely.
Ms. Chavez, how are we doing on the student count? I know there is a goal in order to show progress as far as increased enrollment. Where are we at with that?
So we're making progress. We're not quite there yet, but we are looking to increase by a set number of students. Our goal is 150 students by October the 9th. So we're making progress towards that goal.
All right, great, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you. I would like to remind the public that item D, Acting Superintendent of Schools report, is for informational purposes only. No action is needed or warranted at this time. We are now on item E, which is board commendations. Is there anything that the board would like to raise at this time? Mr. Vickers?
I don't have anything.
Mr. Bennett?
I do not.
Mrs. Simoia?
I don't have anything at this time.
Mr. Tally?
Nope.
I have a couple I would like to raise. First of all, I attended a special meeting of the Valencia County Commissioners on a Friday evening going into Labor Day. The commission met to approve our mill levy, and they worked very hard and addressed some concerns that were brought to us from the public. And so I would like to thank the commission and the Valencia County Clerk for being timely and responsive, and especially on a holiday weekend. We also have some fabulous people out in the community that have been working to help gather some homecoming attire for our students, and I would like to thank them very much. Many of them do not want their name mentioned, but I think that this is an ongoing tradition, and I really appreciate that our community is coming together. Having said that, we are on to item F, public comment. Mrs. Chavez, Mrs. Wolf, how many speakers have signed up to provide comment at tonight's meeting?
We have 2 speakers tonight.
Before we move to public comment, I'd like to remind our audience of the board's procedures for handling public comment, which are found in board policy B2150 BEDH. Public comment is limited to 5 minutes per individual speaker. However, the board president may further restrict or waive these time limits based on the number of speakers. The board welcomes public input. The board does not prohibit public criticism or comment upon personnel matters, but does discourage personal attacks on board members, staff, personnel, or other persons. Presenters are cautioned that statements or representations concerning others that convey an unjustly unfavorable impression may subject the presenter to civil action. Any person making public comments shall be solely responsible for the content of his or her comments. The board neither adopts nor assumes responsibility for any comments made by the individuals during the public comment meeting. Okay, no problem. There are 3 speakers. Hey, Mr. Benjamin Waits, did I say that correct? Would you please come up, please, sir? And I want to remind you, our microphone is sensitive, so you need to step back just a little bit.
Madam President, Acting Superintendent Chavez, members of the board. My name is Benjamin Waits. I'm a member of the community and a parent of a couple students at RGE Elementary School. I've been in the last couple of meetings, the workshops or work meetings, as well as board meetings, and there's been a lot of discussion about the SROs and the use of their vehicles, and the policy and procedures that are meant to keep everybody safe and protect our SROs. I'd feel remiss not to make comment on this because I feel that as a parent, I feel a lot safer having my students go to school with the SROs present. And one of the important aspects is that their vehicles are present at the school and that they have their vehicles with them. In my opinion, that is it's a tool of the trade. It's a necessity for them to have their vehicles and have quick access to them. Our officers are expected to respond immediately. And if they don't have their vehicles handy, we're asking them to use their personal vehicles to respond, and it's just not as effective. The other thing I want to talk about was the policies and procedures. We had a long discussion in the last meeting about policy and procedure, and I understand the policies and procedures are necessary and they need to be in place. It's what really keeps us as a civilized society. And I know that, as Mr. Baca said in the last meeting, we have had policy and procedure in place in the past. And we're also surrounded by other school districts that do have good, successful SRO programs. So to me, it seems quite simple that we either need to resurrect the policies that we've had in place, or we simply need to adopt policies and procedures from our neighboring school districts. That way, we're all protected. We have the necessary documentation that we need, and the laws are satisfied. I have a very special concern for our SROs because I feel like at this point in time, they feel like their jobs are at risk. The funding is at risk, and that they aren't appreciated for who they are and what they are. I remember the SRO names of every SRO I had growing up, which is, to me, I had to think back on it. It's been 30 years since I met my first one. His name was Officer Juan Loetta. And after that, we had Officer Randy Moore at the middle school. And after that, we had Officer Chris Canoff at high school. If I can remember their names after 30 years, that's how important these SROs are to us as students at the time and now as parents. I knew Officer Ross's name before I knew my kid's teacher's name. Why? Because Officer Ross was a hero to them. Is a hero. Unfortunately, he is no longer with the district after several years, but we do have a great replacement for him. So with all that said, we need our SROs. They're extremely important to us as parents, that we can feel safe leaving our kids at those schools, that they're protected, that they're on site, and they're ready to take action. One of the articles I read this week came out of Idaho. The school district, looking at the budget, made some business decisions, and one of them was to cut the SRO program. It saved the school district $90,000. They reduced the force by hiring Eagle Eye Security. So they have 25% less personnel on campuses. And as the superintendent of that school district made mention, they are just that. They are security guards. They are not trained officers. They are not law enforcement. They do not have to maintain the standards of what our officers do with their weapons. They don't take any special training on that. They are merely there to watch the perimeter of the school. Our SROs are much more than that. These security guards, when something does happen, they can react immediately, but they're told they have to call local law enforcement. How much faster, more effective, and life-saving is it that we have SROs on campus that can respond immediately, that they're trained, they're professionals, and that most of them, if you ask them, they got 20 years or 30 years experience. We can't pay for that, right? That's something that these officers have invested their lives, and they're willing to sacrifice their own life to protect our kids. Our return on investment is huge there. Let's not make a simple business decision of saving $50 a month or $100 a month on a vehicle be the difference in one of our students losing a life or them not being able to respond. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for addressing the board. We appreciate your time and your attendance. They're going to get a perfect attendance award, possibly. May I please invite Mr. Sam Colombo to the podium.
Good evening, board president, board members, and acting superintendent. I am Sam Colombo. I manage the 24/7 campaign, which works to make New Mexico schools truly tobacco and nicotine free. We help districts with adopting, implementing, and enforcing truly comprehensive tobacco-free school policies. Under a truly comprehensive policy, tobacco and nicotine use, possession, and distribution is prohibited by anyone, anywhere, at any time, so 24/7. Back on November 7th, the New Mexico, of 2023, the New Mexico Public Education Department approved a rule that requires that all public school districts adopt a comprehensive tobacco policy. This means one that just checks more of the boxes needed for what we're experiencing in a modern age with nicotine and tobacco products. I have some copies of this rule I'd be happy to give to the board or send a digital copy as well. But this updated rule was in large part due to the efforts of high school students across the state that we worked with to push for this change with 24/7. Last year, Senior Rio Romero from Century High School helped us with this policy as well. We miss Rio. But Las Lunas Schools is doing a good job currently to commit to healthy students, staff, and visitors. But a lot of districts in the state still need to renew their commitment to their communities by updating their tobacco and nicotine product policies to be truly nicotine and tobacco free to meet those new standards. So we reviewed the current policies for staff, visitors, and students in the district in regards to tobacco and nicotine. In order to have a comprehensive policy, the following updates are required, which I'll just summarize them and hopefully we can talk at a later date in more detail. But first, the policy for students, JICG, and staff school personnel in sections G, B, E, D, as well as KFAA for visitors, must read that the use, distribution, and possession is prohibited at all times. So the main thing there, it has most of those pieces there, but the main thing to add would be at all times. Second, the school policies must specify that the schools provide referrals to resources that help students and staff overcome addiction when they are found in violation of the policies. And this requires progressive and supportive discipline measures for students. We have examples of what this means in the 24/7 toolkit, which I'm happy to leave a physical copy and send a digital one as well. And we also have example language for what this could look like in the analysis that I made, which I will also be happy to leave some copies with. That just gives you an example of what you could say in your policy, which you can either take that as it is or use it to reference as you're updating policies. Lastly, each district advertising policy, so in your district, it's KHB, shall prohibit the promotion of all tobacco and nicotine products on school property or at off-campus school-sponsored events. Those are the main updates that I'm seeing necessary in order to be in compliance, so it's already pretty good. But there is that new rule just to get up to date. There's a few little changes. And as a partner and resource to Los Lunas schools, we're here to offer help with updating that policy as much as you would want that help. We have policy language that you can adopt completely or use as a reference. We have a few different resources as well to support the school. So for example, the new PED rule requires that districts supply their schools with proper signage communicating the policy. We have signs that look like these. Our newer ones are bilingual and we can send those for free to all of the schools in the district, including bigger aluminum signs and posters. So I'd be happy to get those to the district. We also provide our 24/7 toolkit, faculty training, resources to all districts in the school upon request for free. And aside from that, we are now offering middle and elementary school presentations. So we're happy to come into any of the classes in the district and do a presentation on nicotine on our campaigns as well. I figured I'd keep this presentation brief. It's just public comment, just to kind of start the conversation. But I would love to follow up. If this is more appropriate for a work session, I'd be happy to get that set up with y'all as well. But I hope we can do what we can to help protect the community more by updating these policies to state standards. And I would love to know who the best person to follow up with would be, but aside from that, I am all done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive.
Thank you.
Yes, we always appreciate help,
Yes,
and I will follow up with an email.
great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I please invite Mr. James V. Sorry, I'm having difficulty with the handwriting. Not a problem. Would you do me the honor of please pronouncing your last name?
Good evening, Madam President. Board, my name is James, last name is Vautier. V as in Victor, A-U, T as in Tom, I-E. The reason for my visit tonight is to let you know that I'm employee at Palms and Associates. I represent the New Mexico Public School Insurance Authority, and I'm here to address some of the confusion that may result with the old rules, the old guidance documents that we gave, as well as that we collaborated with NIMSI on, as well as the new rule that rolled out in 2020, the 61212, concerning armed school security personnel. To begin with, I'm not sure if the board, I know I don't have a lot of time, and I'm usually long-winded, so I'm gonna really try to do this quick. But does the board know how the New Mexico Public School Insurance Authority works? Schools, public and charter schools pull their insurance together into a big pot. The New Mexico Public School Insurance Authority in Santa Fe State Agency, they manage that pool. My company, Palms and Associates, we're insurance brokers. We're an insurance brokerage, but what we do is we have a big risk management. So we offer risk services to all the public and charter schools that come with their premiums. So we don't charge anything extra for our services. So that said, I do security related risk management. I've been employed with Palms since 2013. in the first couple of years of my tenure with Palms and Associates, I started seeing some things here at our schools involving employees that were carrying weapons. Now, I knew what they were there for, but there was no guidance, there was no structure, there was no policy around that. Some schools didn't even have a scope of duties for them. So, and the laws, they weren't breaking the laws because the state laws had exceptions to that law. State law meaning unlawful carrying of a deadly weapon on school premises. And then the federal law also had holes in it, well, or exceptions. So the layperson can combine those two laws together and create an employment contract with anybody they wanted to, and there's really no vetting process there. There's no, other than the standard employee stuff for a school there would be, but no qualifications requirement, no training requirement, nothing. So until we could get something done in Santa Fe, we created that standard that rolled out in 2018, in March of 2018, which doesn't apply anymore. It's the NIMSIA mandatory standards for school security personnel, correct?
Does not apply anymore.
Does not apply anymore. Because we were just trying to patch a hole. Because of what, there wasn't nothing there. So I even had a school district call me up and ask and tell me they had some parents that wanted to be the armed school security people. Could they do that? Wait, hold on. Let's talk about this because they're acting on behalf of the school district. There's some liability and exposure. So technically I'm a risk manager, and that's the kind of stuff we look at when we're talking about all the consulting and stuff. What's the risk? What's the exposure? So in 2020, 2019, you're familiar with House Bill 129, authored by Linda Trujillo. That passed and eventually turned into NMAC Code 61212, which is specific to employees of a school district that the school district wants to arm. Now, I'll try not to confuse you because I only have a minute and a half. There's a difference between a law enforcement agency and a general employee, even though here in Los Lunas, you have employees that are also law enforcement officers. So does APS. There's only 2 school law enforcement agencies, K-12 school law enforcement agencies in the state, APS and Los Lunas. Schools, because New Mexico is rural, school districts that don't even have access to SROs, not to mention trying to create their own law enforcement agency, they have resorted to trying to arm an employee just to have some security. And so that's what these guidelines are for. They're for the employee that has a minimum amount of time as former law enforcement, because we didn't just want anybody. And that's what this is for. It's not for law enforcement. So the agency, your agency, is certified through DPS and recognized as a law enforcement agency, but they're commissioned by, if I'm not mistaken, 2 law enforcement agencies locally, local and county, if I'm not mistaken. The commissioning part is huge because they can work together and offer the training and do all that kind of stuff. So from a risk standpoint and a premium standpoint and an insurance and a rate standpoint, everybody wants, that's the bottom line, right? Is my rate's going to go up. Rates are based, insurance rates and premiums are based on losses and exposures. And there hasn't been losses. So premiums don't go up. If a school district calls me and wants me to, and wants to arm people, their premiums aren't going to automatically go up. I'm just going to make sure they're covering themselves by adhering to the rule, right? And make sure that the board knows about it, make sure that we'll talk about everything they want to do to arm their own staff and what the costs could be involved in that, and that kind of stuff. Now, comparing armed school security personnel with a law enforcement agency, there's cost difference, right? There might be, because if you arm just employees that through 61212, then you're taking on all of the cost of that training. Does that make sense? You're taking on all the costs of that training. Whereas a law enforcement agency may have an agreement with the commissioning agency to do that, I mean, thereby saving some money for the school district. But we're not involved in that. We're just involved in the loss and the risk side of it. So I will say that I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I will say that there's big, like Rio Rancho, Las Cruces, they've all wanted to, when they were talking about arming people, I've referred them to Las Lunas Police because I encourage them to create their own law enforcement agency because there's more back in there. It's just from a risk standpoint, it's better.
I need
that
to
make sense?
stop you.
I got you. Sorry for the late.
Thank you for your information.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're willing to kind of hang out, because this is an
Sure.
agenda topic, and if we get to discussion, we may ask for your participation if you don't mind.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Okay, item G was removed from the agenda. We are now, I've little piles on that stuff here. We are now on to H. Discussion and possible action regarding take-home vehicles for the school resource officers.
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
I would request to take to a further date.
Is that your motion, sir?
Yes.
Second that motion. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to know why the table was.
Yes, I would like to explain, we had over 5 different budget meetings, and throughout all meetings, there was reductions made in pretty much quite a few different departments. Reading off here, we removed a previous added assistant principal at Las Lunas High School, 2 additional band and additional SRO director of personnel. We filled vacant principal vacancies with assistant principals, not filling a vacant AP positions in 5, and I'll get back to this in 5 sites. Move administrators to locations based on need. All vacant positions reviewed by superintendent before filling SRO maintenance workers, APs. Also on this budget was limit take-home vehicles down to 5 from 27. Reduced out-of-state travel by half. We moved 15 special services assistants to IDAB and Medicaid. And the reason I'd like to table this is, one, we have contacted the New Mexico School Board Association and drafting us a policy so we can get that and address all these things we have. Not down talking to SROs. I trust them. I believe them. I have full faith in them, but I want them to be protected as the district's protected. That also being said, board policy, the board powers and the responsibilities. If you look at B-0200, I think it's bill at 22, and it states the board to refrain from involvement in delegated administrative functions. And that's why I'd like to hold off on the vote. Let's get us a policy put together and move forward with it there. Because if we start picking across this budget and putting this one back in and that one back in, we're not going to do it. And if you recall, there was a last minute motion by you to add those assistant principals, 5 assistant principals, which got approved in the board, and we did approve the budget, okay? That to me is a living document. We got to live by that until next budget session. But the fact that I've requested for a board policy specifically to security to be done, hopefully we have something drafted by October 8th, and we can all have an open work session, come to a meeting and come to agreement on how our people would be protected and also our district would be protected. And that's my reason.
Is there any other comments?
Yeah, so a few comments, with regards to the budget being a living document. We approve variances all the time on the budget. In fact, as part of the consent items, there's a bunch of variances that we're approving perhaps tonight. So budget is a living document. As I believe it was Officer Garcia presented to us, this is actually very well could be a budget savings exercise by passing this. Actually a significant budget savings because of the infrastructure. So right now, I don't know how the SROs are getting to school, if they're driving their vehicles and picking up their personal vehicles and picking them up here. If that's the case, I don't know where they're changing. I don't know where they are like suiting up, putting on their uniforms and things like that. The extra time that they use, that's all overtime. So I mean, I understand what you're saying about the budget, but I also know that we make changes to that budget regularly. We have discussed this numerous times in work sessions. And also, previously, last week, we discussed the policy, we looked at the former policy for security, and it is not significantly different than the current policy that we have for security. There are differences, but I feel that the same procedures that existed under that policy could exist under this policy. If we're waiting for that procedure, there are other procedures that our uniformed personnel have to follow as well. We have to have procedures in place for them to be able to carry their weapons. And if we're going down that road, are we gonna take their weapons from them? What's next? So before we table it, I think we need to have that discussion. And I think that it would be very beneficial, both fiscally and security wise, for us to discuss this and to pass so the SROs can take their vehicles home. And we do that this evening instead of tabling it.
Any other comment? Mr. Vickers, do you have comments?
No.
Mrs. Simoia, do you have a comment?
Yeah, actually I do. I'm very concerned. Thank you for the public comment this evening. There seems to be a perception in the community that this board does not back the blue, which nothing could be further from the truth. We still have, in lieu of not having a policy in place in which we are working diligently, and I do believe we should try to finalize that by the October meeting. We still have SROs that are carrying weapons and conducting their business. And the only thing that seems to be that we're delaying and keep postponing is the use of their take-home vehicles. In the work session, and I apologize, I wasn't a sworn-in board member during the initial work session, so I was a community member at that time. I heard a dollar amount that was minimal compared to our total budget, minuscule compared to our total budget of what the take-home vehicles cost. So I do believe that their vehicles are a tool of their job, just like their weapons and their vests and their cameras. My understanding is there is only a few that actually live outside of Valencia County. And even if they're en route. I like the idea that when they get there, they're ready to go. And they don't have to stop and change their clothes. Anytime, anyone that owns a weapon knows anytime you take that off and put it down and put it back on, there's chances of things happening. I don't think that should be, I think that's more of a concern for me. Where they're changing, if they're in public schools, locker rooms, etc. I like the idea of them getting dressed at their home, getting in their vehicle and getting to work, all ready to go. And I think that vehicle is an extension of their uniform. And I think that we owe it to those employees in our district that are SROs and protecting our staff to quit delaying that one piece of it so that they know we are supporting them and that the purpose of writing this policy is to protect the financial interest of the community, but to protect them from lawsuits as well. That has nothing to do with their vehicle at this point in time. They're still covered under their vehicle at this time, as if any employee riding in a Las Lunas vehicle is as well. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mrs. Simoia. So I have a couple of comments that I would like to add. First of all, thank you to our guest speaker for providing the updated, where did you go? Oh, I'm looking for you. Updated information. Thank you very much. About the POMS. And I happen to have 6.12.12 with me. And 6.12.12.9 states each local school board and governing body of a charter school shall establish policies and procedures addressing pre-employment and continuing employment requirements for school security personnel. So when you read through there, it does not talk about a policy required for a district.
Can you go to the microphone?
Yes, please.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just yelling.
The rule is specific to if one of these gentlemen retired from their job, minimum of 4 years on, they retired in good standing and they were wanted to be employed by the district, they armed school security. If you, obviously the board has to make a decision whether they're gonna be armed or not. So that's what this applies to. I know it's confusing because your people here are employees of the school district. But this rule was not created thinking about Los Lunas. Does that make sense? It was created thinking about all the other school districts that don't have access to SROs that are rural. Does that make sense?
It does, but that's where,
And there are holes in this rule.
yes,
There are, because it's completely silent on private security options too, but they're a contracted deal, so I mean, it's not gonna be a violation of someone contracting a security. Again, I go back to what kind of training do they have and what's the level, you know, because it's all about liability, right? So from a risk management standpoint, who's got the better training, law enforcement or a level 3 security guard?
I don't think any of us dispute the level of training and competence for any of our men and women in blue. But you were a perfect segue. We have too many holes in this existing. Okay. So in addition to having the holes, we also, by a lack of policy, because we are silent on the issue also, we have no protection for our employees. Correct?
Correct.
Without the protection of a policy from this district, we are actually putting them at risk. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it would be our due diligence. Money cheapens this argument, in my opinion. Because and I believe I can say here, the argument here is less about the money and more about the protection for our people in our community. I echo what Mrs. Simoia said. There is not one board member that's sitting up here that we have not talked about cutting this program. That myth needs to go away. We have not talked about a reduction in force. That myth needs to go away. We have not talked in any way, shape, or form, and we didn't through budget, did we talk about in any way reducing the magnitude of what we believe they bring to our schools. We know the value and we have complimented the value and we have celebrated the value. So please understand that. Those things should be very clear after this particular meeting. However, the silence in code puts our personnel at risk. And we have a body of lawyers. We've contacted the Ortiz Law Firm. We have contacted our policy writer. We have contacted the Cuddy McCarthy Law Firm and asked for guidance because a policy levels the playing ground for all of our employees and their safety and our community. Would you agree with that?
Agreed.
Okay, so I do appreciate the difference in understanding because this rule to me was about not about school resource officers.
No.
But about school personnel or
Right.
school, what do they call them? School security personnel, SSPs.
Right.
Which would have been in the former POMS level 3, which was the lowest stage that it would have been in the March 2018, correct?
So in that document, we just mirrored. We mirrored what the three different levels of private security, what they had. That was really the only guidance out there.
Correct,
And we pretty much mirrored all their security requirements
right.
as far as, you know, the psychological evaluation, the background checks, the firearms training and all that stuff. And then this rule as well, it's also silent on less lethal tools. It only talked about a firearm.
That's
in this
correct.
rule. So when I talk to people and talk to school districts about this, I try to get them to talk about that stuff as well. And
Correct.
whatever, the first thing they gotta do is get that board to make that decision, create a policy, and get that scope of duties out for that armed school security.
And if you are silent on those things.
Right. It's not
Correct.
good. Correct.
Now, that also extends, I agree with Mrs. Simoia that a vehicle can also extend to part of the requirements of the job. However, this is a vehicle that may be used differently than how the superintendent would use their take-home vehicle. Would you agree?
I could, yes.
Okay, so therefore, again, with having silence, because in some of our former MOUs that we had some conflicting language that said, gosh, these vehicles could also, they could be called out, our SROs could be called out to participate in other events that are not district-related events.
For example.
I love that look, because there again, we might be opening our personnel to a risk.
What specific, give me an example of an event that you.
I would be happy to.
If I may, just from my experience in the past with APS, as a former school resource officer myself with Albuquerque Police Department, they only had jurisdiction on a school ground. They didn't have jurisdiction off campus, and I'm not sure if that's the way it is here, but I think it might be. I think it should be. So a car being used in a chase off campus, I don't know if that happens, but again, I'm.
Number 4, Los Lunas Schools Police may pursue a violent felon in progress.
Okay.
Questionable, concerning?
If you're asking me if you're still gonna get covered if something bad happened, yeah, you would.
I think that we would be really
From an
happy.
insurance standpoint, you would.
Okay, that's good to know, because I don't
Yes.
think that was a question. That was a question. That's part of the reason that we look for legal opinions. Then we also have a statement that talks about that we are strictly prohibited from exercising law enforcement authority. So if we're doing something that's not related to the district, we have a provision here that says we cannot. But one of the benefits that's listed in the documents that we were given for having a take-home vehicle is to assist in other activities that may not be district related. So we have confusion.
Yeah.
And then we have silence in the law, and we have no policy. Does that possibly add up to why
There's some,
we're concerned and why we've asked not one, but 2 legal advisors for their input and then the
Yeah.
policy writer?
it does.
It does not in any way, because we might want to put the brakes on using a vehicle and understanding when and how that vehicle could be used. By putting the brakes on it until we have a policy and we have clarity is not a statement about worth or notability or need or any of those things. Would you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are there any more? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for coming back up and taking the hits. I appreciate it.
Dr. Wasowski,
Sir.
this is not policy, right?
That is
That's
correct.
That's procedure, right?
That's-
So,
Procedure.
so I want to make sure that we're not confusing the two, right? Because before our SROs were taking home vehicles and there was no policy,
That is correct.
but there was procedure, albeit maybe self-contradictory. but there was procedure. I still think that we have a policy under security that covers the SROs. The procedure may need to be tightened up, and that's something that I think we definitely need to do. But I still think that there is policy already, just as there was policy before we adopted the MSBA policies.
Actually, I think I've just had something come to my brain, so hold on for just a second here. So a former policy we had the 4.5, which was security, but we also had a former policy, school resource officers and firearms. That also went away. So we had a separate policy to specifically cover school resource officers. And you are correct. We had a policy that addressed security, but that policy did not intentionally mention the roles, responsibilities, guardrails, if you will, et cetera, for our school resource officers. We also had confusion in our former policy, which was policy 9.27, about the use of district-owned vehicles and when they could be used. So again, we've inherited a mess, right? And we are doing our best to fix this mess. And part of my rationale for wanting to table this until we can get to October 8th is for all of the reasons I just mentioned. I do not want to leave any one of our personnel uncovered without a thorough and comprehensive policy. The thing about changing the uniforms has me a bit puzzled. I have two sons in uniform, not in blue or not in police, but in military. They are required to get to their work site early and change, sometimes be in an officer's uniform at the rank of major. And I asked them, and required gear, and I've asked them, what is the time it takes to change into uniforms? And they've said that, Mom, it's pretty simple. We put on our trousers and we put on our adopted polo. And then when we get to our particular base and our work site, we put on the rest of our official uniform. So I'm not buying that whole thing about we need time to change. And it takes a huge amount of time. I appreciate donning and doffing. Like I said, I have two boys in current service, all three at one point in time. So I talked with them and I talked with a neighbor about donning and doffing, who is not with Los Lunas, by the way. I don't want him to be pulled over and asked a question. So some of these things that have been brought as a legitimate argument for using a vehicle, to me are small potatoes in comparison to the protection for our people,
So,
but that's my opinion.
If I might address the donning and doffing,
Mhm.
if our SROs show up, gentleman over there is wearing a polo and has some insignia on it. If
Yes.
it carries the Los Lunas School, security, police, whatever the name is, they now become a target. Potentially. So as they're driving down in their personal vehicle, wearing some sort of security law enforcement shirt, it identifies them as a law enforcement officer, and it also identifies them as a target. Thus, when they get to whatever site that they go to, they're not required to wear that insignia in their vehicle. When they get to their site, then is when they have to do a complete change of clothing. Maybe they show up in jeans and a polo, but they've got to change into their school uniform. And also all of the other equipment. I don't know how many pounds of equipment that they carry with them, but their weapons need to be locked up somewhere. I don't know where they're locked up right now, but they need to be locked up somewhere. They can't be taking those in their personal vehicles. There's a number of reasons. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I also think that we're making them a target.
Well, I'm not suggesting that they have to wear a Los Lunas Schools SRO polo. I am suggesting that they could wear a Los Lunas Schools polo. because I know
That shouldn't make you a target?
I shouldn't, it shouldn't. But I will show you a time where a Board of Education one, most definitely you received some interesting gestures as you drive down the road.
Madam
Those are
President?
my things. Yes.
Oh, Madam President, and my case in point is, yes, we inherited fun. We inherited some fun and we are going to resolve this, trust me. We were talking- Yeah, you know, I was in that audience when you announced this, okay? But one of the things is the take-home vehicle is a piece of it. It's not the whole thing. The concern for me is, because I do carry, the concern is them, whether it's a personal carry or what, I do believe they are a target. There's not like individuals who, any of our SROs in the high school, it's not like they're highly not recognized by the students or individuals in the community that would do harm to them. I believe that the vehicle is an extension of their uniform. And the vehicle is just one piece of the policy that we do need to tighten up. That aspect of it, so that in the MOU, it is not being used to chase felons off campus use. I really do think that they're designed to protect our students. And they're an extension of the community, of the school community, and that's it. So, but I think that the car portion is just a piece of their uniform. We will tighten this up, and I am thoroughly committed to partner with this to make sure we do that. But the idea of the only thing different, they're still doing the job. And they're still doing everything in that handbook, because in light of policy, they're still doing that.
Well-
The only thing we've done is take the car away. And I don't, we talked about the financial aspect of it. We all agree on this board that the financial aspect isn't significant. To me, it's at least let them have the car, and then we'll tighten this policy up and working with them so that it makes sense, because I'm not a law enforcement aficionado.
And Madam
Although-
President, I have one
yeah.
more comment. And also in lieu of policy, there is a policy C 2200, which is administration in absence of policy. So, like I said, by us not voting on this, this becomes a decision basically of the superintendent.
So Mr. Bennett, are you saying if we don't vote on it?
No, I'm saying, I'm just saying that if we don't, well, yeah, I mean, because we don't have a policy, that's what I'm saying here. To vote on this, I want a policy. We don't, so if we voted not to have it go forward, there is policy C 2200, which is administrative in the absence of policy, which Ms. Chavez can make that decision.
So you're implying that if we don't vote on it, Ms. Chavez could say, hey, go ahead and take your vehicles home?
Well-
If that's her choice.
The motion on the table is to table it at this time. So we would have to go ahead and vote on that motion first, and then stand for another motion on what we'd like to.
First.
Oh, to the,
Can you go to the podium, please?
oh, no.
Madam President, members of the board, Mrs. Chavez. I've sat here, I've kind of listened to the discussion. And, one of the things that I brought up was about the transparency, and we're talking about the cost, and initially it was a cost of the $8,000 because of the board. A work session that was done in spring, and it should be noted that that was a work session, not a full policy or budget recommendation. My questions, I got a couple of simple questions. I do agree with Mr. Talley. The budget, depending upon enrollment, others is always changing. If you look later on, you have a number of bars, increases, decreases. So the fact to say that because in March or April, that was agreed upon, it's not correct. I will tell you that right now. The other thing, Madam President, I will also say, one thing that's not in the budget, I do believe that there are a couple of departments that actually claim mileage for their work within the district. My question would be, is that true? Is in fact what departments do claim mileage? And if so, was that in the budget? Because I'm going to venture to say that it's going to be more than the $8,000 that was reported. So we're talking about technology? As far as there is budget for that? Well, then again, it's hard to say, right? Because these are turned in dependent upon mileage, dependent on the responsibility. So I want to address that. The other thing is the question regarding, you know, the policies and what distinguishes Las Lunas from other departments. And it is a law enforcement agency. We're the second in the state. They are recognized by DPS. They are actually, and the term, I think, directing to the sheriff, I think the designation that these guys have is special deputy in Valencia County. Is that correct? And Madam President, special deputy actually means that these are police officers. They are police officers that, although paid by the district, still have all the certifications, rights, the responsibilities and adherence to the code and duties as a police officer. Is that correct by that special designation? That is correct. So I want to make it very clear that when we say that it's about a budget issue and we're talking about take-home vehicles, you mentioned earlier that the people in uniform, I do believe that the military is not regulated by the Fair Labor Standards Act. Military can be pretty much as long as you, I'm not a military guy, but see a couple of guys out there that are Marine Corps, a couple of people out there. I don't think that you guys stopped the clock at 8 hours, did you, sir? So the fact when we compare people in uniform to what we have now, as far as police officer, it is a difference. There is a difference as far as the Fair Labor Standards, and anything over 40 hours is time and a half. So the argument about any type of uniform and them being paid or not paid is not a valid comparison. So, Madam President, when we're talking about the safety and the things that we've dealt with, especially over the last week, the ability to respond to school threats, self-harm. The fact about it is we are, by not being allowed to take home school vehicles, it makes it very difficult for us to do our primary job, you know, of protecting our schools and protecting our students and our families. So, Madam President and members of the board, I would recommend and I would encourage us to think about supporting the take-home vehicles, because I do believe that it is an essential part of our security plan for our district. I also recognize, Madam President, that if there is considerations that need to be done, my primary responsibility is with the schools and with the safety of our students. Be happy to do that. But I do want to make that distinction is that we are different because we are a law enforcement agency. We're the second in the state. And many times, as Mr. Valtier said, when districts are trying to start this program, they're sent to us. So we're one of the models. And even as APS, we have more authority because they're only commissioned in Albuquerque. These gentlemen are cross-commissioned throughout Valencia County. So, Madam President, members of the board, I urge you to consider that. And I also, as a community member, as a father, and also as a state representative, am committed to close those loopholes. If need be, protect policy, not just for the sake of our SROs, but for the sake of our students and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baca.
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Vickers?
we are simply on a motion to table or not to table this.
That's correct.
And I think we've gone, we're arguing the policy rather than the issue of tabling or not tabling. And I think we just need to move to the vote.
Okay.
And then
you're calling
if it fails, then we can complete our argument regarding the policy.
So you're calling for point of order, Mr. Vickers, is that correct?
In a roundabout way, yeah.
At that point, I will call for a vote on the tabling of item H, discussion and possible action regarding take-home vehicles for SRO. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Talley?
No.
Mrs. Simoia?
No.
I vote yes, motion fails 2-3. So on item H, discussion and possible action regarding take-home vehicles for SROs.
Dr.
Do I
Wasowski,
have a motion?
Dr. Wasowski, I would move that we allow the school resource officers to take their vehicles home. And at this time to limit that to district activity use only.
I'll second that motion.
I'm writing, hold on. Activities. Would you clarify for me, Mr. Talley, what you mean by district activities only for the take-home vehicles?
So it was discussed that, there is, like, sometimes they would do stuff with other local law enforcement. I forgot exactly what it said in there, but the example was given, chase a criminal, right? I think that what we need to do is, until our policy, our procedures are completely updated, we allow them to take their vehicles home and we limit them to district work only. So that they're protected by the take-home vehicle stuff that we already have for other employees of the district.
Use of school.
What was that?
The policy, E 2850, use of a school vehicle is for.
So basically would limit them so they would not be responding to calls other than district related calls.
So I'm going to repeat your motion.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Okay? You move to approve the use, or to allow our school resource officers to take home their assigned district vehicles, and they are limited to the use of district-related activities only until a policy is approved.
That sounds correct.
I hope that was recorded.
They're freely used, some of those take the district assigned vehicle sign. With the caveat, they cannot be used to assist other law enforcement agencies until the policy is updated.
That sounds correct. Now, yes, Ms. Simoia suggested the wording reinstate the use.
To reinstate the use, because technically speaking, it was, yeah.
Yes, let's do it one more time. To approve the reinstatement of the use of the district assigned vehicles for school resource officers limited to district related activities only.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
Ms. Simoia?
I'll second that motion.
I did just a moment ago, but I
Yeah.
did not mean to.
I think
Until. No, I'm glad you did that. Thank
until the
you.
policy and procedures are updated. Correct.
Yes, I'm just writing. Hold on. I want to make sure I get it right.
One more time.
Hold on.
Let me get this right.
Okay. One more time. Mr. Talley moves and Mrs. Simoia seconds to approve the reinstatement of SRO assigned vehicles for take-home use. It is limited to district-related activities only until a board policy is adopted and procedures are updated. I don't know. Feel free to read this back to me, Mrs. Wolf. No, that's what, let's get this right.
improve the state school resource officers being allowed to take the district assigned vehicles and with the county of to do district related activities until policies and procedures are updated. That's what
I think that sounds really good. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, let me just throw a couple. The police chief from Bosque Farms was here earlier, and he will speak, and I guess he got called away, but he's very impassioned about this issue. He thinks that school resource officers are a great benefit for his town, both for Peralta and Bosque Farms Elementaries, because they contract with Peralta for that. So he wanted to talk about that. One issue I think is really problematic is that we have every car here in one small area. And it seems to me that just makes just a level target for vandalism or something when they're all right there in one place. The other issue is, for instance, you know, Mr. Bennett and I represent the area on the east side, and you've got Valencia High School out there in the middle of the desert, and the other schools too. But for instance, if there was an issue that happened before the normal duty hours of the SRO out there, that there was an armed person there and threatening things, or there, you know, some kind of vandalism was happening and the SRO was called, and they would say, well, okay, I'll be there. I gotta go down to the district office and put on my uniform and all my equipment and get my car, and then I'll go up there. That to me is just totally ridiculous. These people have a much greater responsibility than nearly anybody in the district for the safety of our students. And I think it, you know, they need to be given everything all the tools at their disposal to do that job. And I appreciate the fact they do that job. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Is there any other comment?
Looks like Mr. Baca may have it.
I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Baca.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Ms. Chavez. One of the things, and I do appreciate the policy, but I do understand, and I'm gonna have to refer to this. We have a duty to respond or a duty to act by their designation as a police officer. Is that something that, does this policy, if we're coming to a school site and we see an incident or happening, could their certification be removed because of a failure to act? I don't know. I see chief or sheriff out there. Chief.
Excuse me, may I ask you to please come up to the podium because we can't hear you for the record. And then identify yourself, please.
Members of the board, Madam President, Superintendent Chavez, I am Sheriff Denise Vigil. And yes, when en route to a location of service, if there is a felony of some sort taking place and the officer fails to act, there is a huge liability from the DPS board on the failure to act on such an incident like that. So as I can agree, as sitting down and watching that these officers are limited to their district only, the question arises on their way to work. Let's just decide that at a bus stop going to the school, there is an incident that occurs with a child that is considered a felony, these officers now do not have the authority under this to act in any capacity to protect that child or those persons that are in jeopardy of harm. And I understand that you're waiting for a policy to be put in place, but at the end of the day, they still have an obligation as an officer wearing that badge to protect this community and to take care of themselves as well. I don't know how you can rephrase that, but I do believe at a moment like this, they cannot function in the capacity as a police officer with such limitations.
So I'd like to respond and then also ask a question. So I think the example you gave at the bus stop, that does fall within the district, right? So they would be able to respond.
Right.
However, perhaps if it was some other violent crime or something, I guess I would ask the gentleman in the back whose last name starts with a V, if he knows how APS handles that, right? Because APS has a similar type of law enforcement. And how would they handle it if some felony was happening, right?
And
Not that we have to mimic what they're doing, just for informational purposes.
And here's the risk part about it, but I'll just say that they do have access to radio communication as well.
So I understand the risk.
Right.
I hear your point, and
But
it's
what I'm
valid.
saying is just in general, having their unit, being prepared to do the job on the spot is very important. So I can appreciate the fact that your decision to give them back their vehicle is very important, because dressing somewhere else, you are put as a target. We do have employees that they drive personal vehicles because they are not law enforcement certified and their job function is completely different from us as law enforcement. But we do not allow them or put them in the position to wear any type of shirt with the insignia recognizing them as Valencia County, so they are not a target. So these men and women should not become targets either, driving to work.
Concur.
Could you please repeat your question, sir?
So my question was, how does APS and how do they handle the similar situation? Like if one of the officers in Albuquerque came across a violent crime, do they respond or do they not respond?
Their only powers are on the campuses of the schools. They don't have as much, they don't have the special deputy status that you guys have. They're only cross commission.
Okay, so I don't want to endanger or put any of our officers at risk for not responding because they are commissioned. I don't
Right.
want to put them at risk for not responding. But maybe there's something that we can do with the motion to allow that. I'm trying to think how we can, because I really do want to see our SROs back in their vehicles. I do want them to be able to respond appropriately.
Excuse me, just a moment. I have not recognized you. Are you finished, sir?
I just want to finish by saying the level of training, the level of expertise, subject matter expertise, helps minimize and mitigate that risk. So does that help?
Yes.
If I may, Madam President,
Yes.
because I have a question for Sheriff Beekell. Thank you. So this has been, communicated and you're here present tonight, so you're very well aware of it. So making our local law enforcement very well aware that we are trying to iron down a policy. If one of our SROs was to call for support, is there the ability for your agency as well as Los Lunas PD, we can ask them separately to assist us until such time as we can iron out a policy.
Absolutely. We're always here to support the schools, and we've always managed to have that rapport and acknowledgement that we're here to help each other.
And I fully understand the DPS and the certification and the need basically for them to respond and what that means to them.
So if I may, my undersheriff is here and maybe he can clarify a little bit further on that subject. Is that what you wanted to talk about? If you don't mind, can he speak?
Yes, he may. And please give us your name, please.
Madam President, board members, my name is Jeff Noah. I'm the undersheriff. I work for Denise Vigil. Maybe help out a little bit on this. The sheriff's office, we have a policy about our officers, our deputies acting outside of our jurisdiction of the county. And if it's a felony, they're required to take action, but one of the first actions they have to take is to notify the local agency or local jurisdiction that's responsible in that area. So I think to what you're trying to accomplish tonight is if they do come across something on their way to work, on the way home, whatever, that one of the things they do is they would contact the jurisdiction that they're in. I think somewhere along the way tonight, somebody mentioned somebody lives in Albuquerque. That could happen in Albuquerque. And yes, them acting down here within Valencia County, they fall under the jurisdiction of the sheriff's office. You have your own insurance board, we also have ours, and by having our commission card, they fall under our insurance also, so it's something we deal with, and something we look at. And I know one of the things working with the SROs over the years is they're very good about communicating with us. They have, some of them have my cell phone numbers, they have our lieutenants, they have our sergeants, the deputies, they work very well together. If something's going on at the school, and particularly if it's a felony, we get notified about it and we're there to help them and or take over if we need to. So I think maybe the answer to your question is on how you get something through tonight, if that's what your goal is that if they come across something, their first priority is to notify the appropriate jurisdiction they're in so that the proper jurisdiction is there to take over and handle it. Does that reduce your liability? You're unfortunately living in law enforcement in the world we in. There's liability in what we do. But that's how we minimize ours when they're operating outside of our jurisdiction of the county.
Thank you very much. May I have, just a moment, please, sir. May I have the representative from Palms back up to the podium for a moment?
Volunteer, right?
Volunteer. I apologize. So I have written a New Mexico Attorney General opinion number 0707. Are you familiar with that?
No, ma'am.
Whereas New Mexico law does not allow schools to create independent police departments. Can you help me understand how we can be approved by the Department of Public Safety as a law enforcement agency if we have an Attorney General's opinion? And this was written to us, it was provided in a memorandum of understanding between the Los Lunas Public Schools and the Valencia County Sheriff's Office. Can you help me understand that complication in the wording and what that, I mean, this to me sounds like we absolutely don't know what we're doing. We can, we can't, we should, we shouldn't. I mean, do you hear the confusion here?
I understand completely. I would definitely have to research that. I've never heard of that. I've never heard that or seen that before. How long has Los Lunas School Police been in place?
Several years. This memorandum of
15.
understanding was
Long time.
signed in 2019. So it's been, I mean, we've got a good history here.
Right.
But nowhere in this conversation have I heard anything about the New Mexico Attorney General's opinion. So that's something that, of course, is concerning. But then, thank you. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah,
That's the question that I had.
That would fly right in the face of APS police too. So I would have to research that. I'd like to do that.
I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. Mr. Garcia.
Real quick, members of the board, Madam President, Mrs. Chavez. About 15 years, we've been in a department, a school resource officer department. And in that 15 years, I don't think that I recall one instance where we've had to respond to a situation like that. However, when I was a police officer at APS, and I shared that story with you guys, I did respond to a situation like that in progress, a road rage incident with an armed subject. I was not disciplined. However, I was commended for the work that we did. Sometimes you have to react to the situation in front of you. Even as a citizen, you have to react and take note of, you're trying to save a life.
Thank you, sir. And there was an officer that wanted to speak, please, sir.
I just want to say again, like, I think the gentleman in the back, he said the difference between a level 3 armed security and what we have. I mean, we have.
Can you identify?
My name is Officer Casals, and
Yes.
it's been law enforcement now 33 years. There's a difference, and I look in the room, all these guys have tons of training, tons of experience, that I'm not gonna risk my certification or do something dumb that, you know, and I play scenarios through my mind. That's what cops do all the time. I've had scenarios through my mind that I'm coming down the interstate, I see a state cop on the interstate where they're fighting with somebody. I get out in my Ram truck, and now he's worried about if I'm gonna attack him. Is he worried about what's gonna happen? I'm in my marked unit, I turn on my lights, I go assist him and make an arrest. That's a big difference. You know, she brought up the scenario about a violent felon. If I'm in the back of my school or in the back towards the class and a parent with a custodial issue comes up at whatever night point, grabs a kid and takes him off into the parking lot, that's a violent felony. I feel very confident that I've been into pursuit driving, and all these guys have as well, that if I need to chase that vehicle and you get into a pursuit so I can save a child's life, I have all confidence in myself and in these guys that to make that right decision. To start calling out, setting up stop sticks here, let's do this with these other agencies, and that's what the communication is. The last thing I do want to say is, every morning that I'm out there changing, it is degrading. We don't have a locker room, and there's so many times that I'm out there and I have my, you know, I'm unbuttoned, I'm trying to tuck in, and there's ladies coming to work. And, you know, it does take a while to get dressed. And then the other part of it is, I'm at KGE. I leave my school at 4:15. With all the traffic, I'm not getting here till 4:30. By the time I change, put all my uniform, all my stuff in my bag, I have to carry this top thing, this other stuff with my bag, and then get home tired from a long day of being with all the kids. And then I have to get it all down from there so nobody breaks into that and steals any of that. And then I have to take it all, and this is a daily thing. And it's embarrassing, you know, there's times where I see, you know, a female coming to work over here and other people, and I'm out there changing. I have to move my change around, walk around in a different spot just so I could get ready to go. And it's degrading. But those are just the points I wanted to bring out. Like, you know, I have all the confidence. I met all these guys and all the confidence in the world. And to answer your question, me being at KGE, those Las Lunas PD's all over it, man. Those guys, the minute I called, the other day I called for a suspicious male sitting there was 2 units there in no time. And they'll help us with whatever goes on our lockdown drills, on our evacuation drills. They're there to help. And it's a community. Las Lunas is a small, great community. And law enforcement here is, I don't see any state cops here. I retired from state police, but those guys will help as well. I know when I was at Valencia High School, it was just, those guys were always out there. The county was always out there visiting the school and so on. So I just wanted to bring those up that, you know, we are experienced and we're not going to do nothing that I think get us to the.
So, Dr. Wazowski.
Sir.
I think maybe based off the discussion that we've had and understanding insurance a little bit more as well, and the undersheriff mentioned that insurance, they're covered, our officers would be covered under their insurance. I would actually like to amend my motion and remove the caveat, because it seems like that actually causes more issues and potentially more risk and more issues for the SROs. I'd like to make my motion that and amend it for Ms. Wolf. Just to be that we reinstate the ability of the SROs to take their vehicles home. And I don't know if anyone would second that, but I because of the discussion we've had, the things I've learned throughout it, I feel comfortable in making the motion that we just reinstate the use of the SRO's use of their vehicles.
Mr. Tally has amended his motion to state that he moves to reinstate the use of the SRO's district assigned vehicles. Do you want to include until a policy and is adopted and procedures are updated?
I don't want to say until, because that has implications that when we update the policy and procedures, we may remove their ability to take their vehicles home. Right, I mean, that.
It could happen, yeah.
So I stand with the motion that we reinstate their ability to take their vehicles home.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I am going to call for a point of order, which for people in the audience, a point of order says that we've had a lot of discussion. We're starting to circle the wagons. So I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Would you repeat the motion one more time?
Please, Mrs. Wolf, would you repeat the motion?
Mr. Tally made the motion and Seaway seconded to approve the reinstatement of the school resource officers to be able to do. Mr. Tally and Ms. Seaway second to approve the reinstatement of our conservative security resource officers to drive to utilize their assigned district assigned school. I promise it will make more sense when they're.
Is that helpful, Mr. Vickers?
They're saying they can take their vehicles. That's what it is.
Without caveat.
There's no doubt.
Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia?
Yes.
Mr. Tally?
Yes.
I vote yes, motion passes.
Yeah.
We are now on to item I.
With Dr. Osowski?
Yes,
Take a break to write that down.
yes, let's take a break, please. We will take a break for 7 minutes, please. 8:10 is when we will return.
I was gonna say, you first.
I'm like a ballot.
Mrs. Wolf, are you ready to go?
Okay.
We are just so ready to go. I'm going to call this meeting back to order. It is 8:08 PM. Before we move on to item I want to put some final caveats on what we just approved by allowing take-home vehicles. We are without a policy. And we have already clarified that we are unsure where our holes and our gaps are. And the other thing that I'm left very uncomfortable with is who is in charge of whom. So I want to refer to Board Policy C2200, Administration in the Absence of Policy. And I would like this to be very clear. The superintendent shall have the authority with proper legal constraints to implement action if a situation should develop that is not covered by established board policy. It is the superintendent's duty to inform the board of any such action and of the need to develop an official policy as warranted. Mrs. Chavez, I am charging you with the responsibility of developing very strong procedures and guidelines so that until this policy is adopted, it is under your purview and under your direction and under your authority. Until you are comfortable with legal counsel, you are the acting superintendent of this district. You make the decisions for those particular cases until this board assigns a policy. Am I clear?
I understand.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to item J, the approval. Now, where am I at? I don't know where I'm at. The approval, the approval of consent items. I would stand for a motion regarding the consent items.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr.
I move
Vickers.
that we approve the entire consent agenda with the exception of item K, which is the approval of the Los Lunas School Student Behavior Handbook 2024 through 2026 school year.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Mr. Vickers has moved and Mr. Talley has seconded to approve the consent agenda, which will include item J, approval of minutes, numbers 1 and 2. Item L, Finance Committee items. Items 1A, B, C, D, E. Item 2, A through I. Item 3, A and B. Item 4, item 5, item 6. Item L, the Finance Committee items 7, A through L, and 8. Is there any discussion? I will call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. We mix up the roll call there just to keep everybody awake. I would like.
Thank you for doing that.
We just never know how Mrs. Wolf is gonna prepare this, so you gotta stay frosty, my friends. So. I would like to go to item K, please. The approval of the Los Lunas School Student Behavior Handbook 2024-2026 school years. Do I have a motion to approve the Los Lunas School Student Behavior Handbook 2024-2026?
Madam President, I move that we approve item K, approval of Los Lunas School Student Behavior Handbook for 2024 to 2026 school year.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennett, or thank you, Mr. Bennett. Thank you, Mr. Talley. Mr. Talley has moved and Mr. Bennett has seconded to approve the Los Lunas School Student Behavior Handbook 2024-2026 school years. Is there any discussion?
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Talley.
I first want to thank everyone who has put this together and have gone through and made lots of changes, edits, we've discussed this a number of times in different work sessions. And going through, it looks like all of the updates that we requested have been taken account of and have been included. So again, thank you to those who participated in putting this together. Something we really needed, and so that's it. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Madam President.
Yes, Ms. Sigmund.
Just for a reminder of the final items and the reason we couldn't approve it at our last meeting, basically the language on promoting was updated and inclusive of the language that we were looking for. And we did research and there is consistency where maximum was removed and minimum was changed. So the language is consistent. Myself and Mr. Talley did review that language. Great job. That's a heck of a handbook to have to go through. So thank you for the line item and the work that everyone did on that. Appreciate it.
Agreed. And I would like to echo those sentiments. That is not fun work to change policy and rearrange wording and get everybody on the same page. I appreciate very much that the committee incorporated the board's desires. Primarily, Mr. Bennett requested that we have the compete with class statement, which is a notable improvement and expectation from the board that you included the definition and you revised that definition for promotion. We took care of those other details in terms of minimum and maximum, et cetera. Mr. Talley, thank you for reviewing it. Mrs. Simoia, thank you for reviewing it. If there's no other discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Ms. Simoia?
Yes.
Mr. Talley?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion passes 5-0. You might be over here for midnight.
That'd be nice.
Madam M.
I'm working it.
More business.
We are now on to item M, new business. Board member requests for topics for upcoming board work sessions and or board meetings. I would like to remind the members of the board that for the October work session, we have the review of board policy B0900 for consideration. That is a Mr. Vickers request. We have board governance for all of the section B. If you have other items or corrections for all of section B, I know I have several. So bring your sleeping bags and snackies, please, because we'll be here for a while. We also have in October, Mrs. Chavez, remind me, what else did we list for October? It's not on the top of my brain.
The school safety policy.
School safety
is on this.
That's right, SROs, that'll be number one. I know that for the November work session, Mr. Vickers has requested an update, and this needs to be in a work session first, an update and discussion for the Title IX compliance across our district. Is that correct, Mr. Vickers?
Yes, basically a report on where we are in compliance.
And we would also like to see the district athletic handbook, but that will be in November. Is there any other topics from the board members that you would like to see? October's pretty full.
Madam President, this can even wait till after the first of the year. We might want to give ourselves some breathing room. But what I would like to see is an opportunity, whether this is in a work section so that we can actually bite the community. I'd like to see some communication between the board and a report from Dr. Sam at UNMBC to see how we can what programs are currently going on and what they're needing from us and what we can use from them. Both at UNMBC Workforce Solutions. I don't know if we should be inviting CNM at this time on something like that. And again, this can come in 2025 because we do have an awful lot of board policy and sleepless nights for the next 3 months. So, yeah. and reading.
So you would be fine for January 2025?
I'm fine for January or February. We might want to check with their schedule as well, because I know they go out on break in December, January, but just getting an opportunity, because next steps is always what we're looking for our students, whether they're going to be going into a workforce situation and they've had training and skills capability to do so that we're giving them, hearing from them, what they're needing, what they're doing, what they have to offer. And I know we do have a liaison within the district, and perhaps Ms. Chavez can work with that liaison.
Thank you. That's a very good topic. That might be a nice break from
that
board
might-
policy.
Yeah. We get,
Hear from somebody else. That would be lovely.
Yeah.
Are there any other topics? Mr. Bennett, did you have a topic that you would like to have? None this time?
This time. Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Vickers.
I appreciate you adding the topic for the work session of B 900. And that has been on work session agendas for the past 2 work sessions, and we never got to it. So I would appreciate if that was placed near the top so we can finally deal with it.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Powell?
Yes, a couple different things. First, I think, we need on the agenda, seems like it would be an agenda item. We voted, put together a committee and to discuss closing RGE. And then we haven't done much beyond that.
So would you like a report?
I think a report and where we're at, the status of that, and if there's any further discussion that we need to have on that, what's that?
Work session agenda?
I don't know if that should be work session, or maybe that's part of the superintendent report on or
However you want it.
Let's do that under your superintendent's report for October. Would October be fine?
It will.
Is that fine with you, Mr.
I
Tom?
think that works. We haven't heard anything about it for a long time. I think it's good to hear about it again. The possible work session about school transportation, different modes of transportation. There's been discussion in the community about, hey, I can't walk to school. I guess at some of the schools, there are rules against walking to school. They can only do the drive up, drop off, drive up, pick up, or ride the bus. So that might be a good work session topic.
How about we ask Acting Superintendent Chavez to present with us a background during her superintendent report
In October?
about the
policy.
concerns, and possibly hear from our transportation director and his
Okay.
staff about the problems, pros, cons of walk-ups. And then from there, if we need to put that onto a work session topic, we can move from there once we have some background. Is that fair?
That's fair. And then I'm gonna say something that I know I'm gonna regret.
You get a second.
You got a second?
You got a second? Go.
So we have had, like, Mr. Vickers indicated, the B 900 has been on work session and kind of fallen off. I hate to say this, but I wonder if we need to have a second work session at another time so that we can, you see, I regret it already, and I can see the look, but there's a lot of things, obviously, we've already discussed tonight that would be good either in a board meeting or in a work session. Many of these things probably would be better off in a work session. But if we can't get them finished in one work session, and maybe this is something we need to discuss in a future meeting, but at least put on something to think about. Do we need to have a second work session for a few months?
So if I recall right, Mrs. Chavez, the October 15th regular board meeting, there's some constraints there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So after that is October 22nd.
I believe we couldn't have a meeting on October 22nd because of some scheduling conflicts as well.
Maybe wait until November to start happening.
Do you want to wait until November?
I'm just tossing that out for consideration.
Okay.
Because we're not getting through some of the stuff that we need to get through, and we need to get through it.
We do. Okay, so warning, board members, in November, we could be doubling up on homework.
A suggestion, if I may,
Yes, please, Mrs.
if we
Travis.
could also start those work sessions a little bit earlier in the afternoon. Not on a finance and audit day where we have finance audit work session, sorry, a little bit tired. That tends to be a long day, so if we could separate the work sessions from finance and audit. Somehow with the schedule, I know we're tight on Tuesdays, but if we could start earlier in the afternoon, we'd have more time.
So preference is not on finance and audit days?
That would be a preference. I know it's not gonna be always doable on the shorter months, and November is probably a shorter month because of the holidays.
And if anybody disagrees with me, you know, that's.
We'll deal with you in the parking lot. We could,
Please, no.
We're moving on.
we can put a work session in front of the October 15th meeting.
Now there's a scheduling conflict
Yes.
that we can't do. So we've already looked at that one, Mrs. Chavez and I already looked at that
On
one.
the 15th?
Yes.
She said on the 22nd.
We have both the
Both.
15th and the 22nd. So starting those in November.
For November,
So
we could.
Do it in November.
start them in November because Mr. Talley, I believe, was the board member who requested one meeting per month. And now I
That's-
believe that Mr. Talley is asking for 2 meetings per month, but I could stand corrected there. Not that I want to throw anything back.
Not two board meetings,
Well, I
2
know.
work sessions. There's a.
I heard meeting. I heard meeting. Okay, I will look at those for November and propose the calendar for all of you so that we can see how that would look. Thank
I'm
you.
already
Mr.
regretting
Talley. You are.
I think that brings us to announcement.
Moving along, is that what you're saying?
I think it brings us to item number N on the agenda.
Right, please move along. Become slap happy at some point in time. So item M, new business, was for information only and for the purpose of gathering input from the board members and Mrs. Chavez and her cabinet. No action is needed at this time. We are on to item N, announcement of meetings. This brings us to the announcement of meetings as allowed by the Open Meetings Act and the District Open Meetings Resolution. On occasion, a quorum of the board members attend the same function, including school and district celebrations and ceremonies, as well as sports functions, conferences, workshops, trainings, and community events. Board members will refrain from discussing and or acting on Los Lunas Schools Board of Education issues in those settings. In addition, only official meetings are published, and if other meetings are scheduled, they will be announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. With that being said, I would like to announce the following meeting. October 8th, the Finance Committee meeting in the Central Office Conference Room at 3:00 p.m. Also on October 8th, 2024, the Audit Committee meeting in the Central Office Conference Room, 4:00 p.m. This is attendance by Audit Committee members only. October 8th, 2024, a board work session in the Central Office Boardroom from 5:00 to 7:00 p.m. The discussion topics at this time will be a proposed change to BOE policy B0900. That will be for discussion. Also, the development of a board policy for school resource officers. And possibly we will get to discussing suggested changes to section B of board policies, which is school board governance and operation. At the board work session, a quorum is in attendance, and this is for discussion only. On October 9th, 2024, the New Mexico School Boards Association Region 4 Fall Meeting, which will be held in Moriarty, New Mexico from 5:30 to 8:00 or 8:30 p.m. This is an association meeting and training. The training is meeting some of the requirements set forth in New Mexico law, and a quorum of the board will be in attendance. On October 15th, 2024, a regular board meeting in the Central Office Boardroom at 6:00 p.m. And I am on to item O, adjournment. With that being said, this leads us to the adjournment of the meeting. I would stand for a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Tally has moved and Mr. Bennett has seconded. I am calling for the vote. Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
Mrs. Simoia.
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion passes 5-0. This board meeting is adjourned at 8:27 PM.
I like the timing of the train.